and welcome to Worktrees. Let's get right into it. We've got some really cool stuff to talk about this week. I wanted to kick off and share a little bit about Flipbook. Have you seen anything around Flipbook yet? You know,
I've only seen a random demo that I saw on X, and all I know is it's a totally new way of generating web pages.
It's an interesting thesis. I think it's more of a concept for the future of software in its own right. So the core of it, for anyone that's not seen it, it's essentially if you use the image generation models, which are now quite good at text
GPT-2 just came out, so yes.
And that's actually really good too. The edit model in particular is excellent. But imagine if all software UI was essentially an image, and you're clicking on the image to go deeper on the UI. And the way that comes to life with the current state models is essentially an infographic that you can kind of endlessly click through. And they've done some really fancy stuff where it kind of does video transitions between each topic and that you're kind of clicking on. You think of it like a National Geographic infographic come to life. That you
I was going to say, it's a little bit more like, Where's Waldo?
Where's Waldo? Yeah.
Where's Waldo? Because imagine just like this large space of things happening, and you want to zoom to click in. And obviously you could bring the book close to your face in the old world, but in this new world, it's all generative. So essentially you kind of tap to zoom in, and then it recreates an entire new scene about whatever it is that you've wanted to zoom in on. And so it sort of creates this fractal reality that allows you to navigate in a way where these spaces or visuals weren't actually pre-created before you arrived there.
And I think the core thesis is not rooted in making cool infographics you can click on. It's more that, what is software at that point, right? If all UI right now is actually a reflection of compiling all of these different, frameworks and systems and libraries into stuff that gets rendered that you click on, what about just going straight to the source and rendering a visual UI that you can interact with, and then having knowledge and context around what's contained in that user interface and clicking through that way?
I was going to ask, in terms of either scaffolding or this multimodality, one of the ways in which there's another product that I helped launch recently called XPilot. And one of the ways that they create video content that's generative is that they will actually write code in a sandbox for any type of visual that needs to be presented. So if these are technical plans or an onboarding process for joining a company, heavy industry, it'll actually create kind of vectors and programmatic stuff so that whatever is rendered on the video is accurate. So my question to you is, when it comes to the idea of generative software UI, how much of that would be sort of programmatically created in a sandbox, a little HTML widget that then is rendered as video or as pixels, and then it's thrown away afterwards? Help me understand this paradigm.
I think the thesis is to just skip straight to generation.
Okay.
And let's take it one step further. Right now, the models are slow, and this demo is slow. I should say the URL, if anyone wants to try it, is flipbook.page. But you have to imagine that in a year, 2 years, you might get real-time generation on this. You might even get high frame rate real-time generation on what you're trying to do. And then you kind of have to rethink what software can be. I mean, am I going to be live editing a Word doc in a completely virtualized image-based tool? I don't know what that could look like, things like that. But you have to imagine that software right now is a translation layer between how computers compile information so that we can then use it. And GUIs are just an completely invented framework around that. Exactly. And so this is essentially, what if you just went to the model and the model gave you something in the end? That's the direction where things could be going. This is where it starts to get really pie in the sky. We can kind of opine on how things come to life. But we'll have a really tangible discussion about how this impacts software once the cost to image generation and the quality is high enough where you could run this locally. It's running locally at 60 to 120 frames a second, right? You get really high quality results at that point.
Well, also, if you don't even need to go through all those layers of interpretation and it's just rendering pixels directly, then all the value is in the model and how fast you can run the model.
Exactly. And especially as the image models become more steerable and you can guide them for consistency. This is a really good segue into what you wanted to bring up, which is Claude Code, but it's that consistency layer of how do you maintain how do you maintain
like
a coherent system? And then actually the world models too that Google's working on, right? It's a very similar, everybody's skating in that direction. And I think people aren't really ready for how weird it's going to get when it is actually cost effective and efficient to on device run a completely virtualized image based piece of software that is just basically being in real time hallucinated by the model that matches the right frameworks and does actually effectively solves the problem. So, but I'd love to hear more on your escapades with Claude Design.
Yeah. So switching topics, I did have my first experience with Claude Design, and just for cultural context and commentary, I found it very interesting, of course, that Mike Krieger, former co-founder of Instagram and then head of product at Anthropic, had to drop from the board of Figma essentially the same day or the day before Claude Design comes out. And I don't know anything about the internal politics there. I'm not connected to it, but clearly Claude Design is anticipating where Figma could have, should have, and may still go. But it creates this interesting dichotomy where Claude gets to start fresh from quite literally a new canvas, where you're talking on the left-hand side about what you want to render on the right-hand side on this infinite canvas. And I got to say, I found the aesthetics quite good. They really did do some work to make these things look and appear designerly. The problem is that it's kind of shit. Like, I actually used it to create a first draft pass at some slides that I needed to do for a product on launch. And what it produced were attractive, but totally unusable. Now, I could have spent any number of tokens, as they, I'm sure, want me to do, to get to a better usable state. But this really felt, for people that misunderstand design as being about the pixels, it's a great product. You will get very shiny, very pretty pixels. But for those who know, or those who have studied design and understand design as the manifestation of intent, not necessarily pretty pictures, it could be quite frustrating. And so I find this to be quite interesting, where the aesthetics are driving, it seems, more of the product discipline than around coaching someone into what is it that you're trying to communicate? What is it you're trying to do? How can we communicate that more clearly in a way that's valuable, as opposed to, well, this topic has been communicated about 1 million times before, so we'll just regurgitate the best version of that and call it a day.
I want to unpack unusable, right?
Okay.
So what did unusable mean to you?
Yeah.
Because if it looked really pretty, but then what did it fail on?
Couple things. So one, I don't know exactly what would happen if I'd taken more time to set up the brand style guide. So I do know that that's one of the onboarding steps, but because this was sort of a throwaway thing for me, took a screenshot of the homepage, and more or less the homepage already looks a little vibe codey. So I was just make it look like this with these colors. It's very sass, so it doesn't have to be that great. But here are the concepts that I want to communicate about. And I kind of dumped in my granola notes for several meetings that we'd had about how to present this topic. And what happened was the slides themselves, again, it's sort of going through Dribble's greatest hits, where people know how to use nice fonts and good colors, but the layout lacked a certain hierarchy. The callouts were a little bit confusing and nonsensical. And then the layout on the slides, consider, and I actually made this clear in my prompts, a product gallery has, each image is 1270 by 760. It's quite small. It is horizontal. And that means that when you're on mobile, you actually have to have quite large text and a very sparse design in order for it to work and to communicate clearly. And it just dumped so much text and so much content that this is a sales deck slide that doesn't make any sense in this other context. And I even gave it examples. I was like, you can have, maybe 50 words at most. And it's just all this stuff. So I zoomed out and was like, this looks really nice. Good font choices, good colors, but completely missed the assignment in terms of what I was trying to communicate, how it needed to be communicated visually, and what some of those constraints were.
First of all, that makes total sense. And I firmly believe that's a reflection of kind of where the models are right now. And
Sure.
that Claude Design is a means to capture more training data.
Interesting.
To effectively guide different use cases in a way that is further upstream, because that you could build all the software in the world, but if it's not usable, right, then your model isn't.
Outputs are not valuable. So the other thing that I found that was frustrating And I was like working on a deadline. It's 11 p.m. as usual, trying to get my stuff done. And Claude just stops responding. It was response interrupted. And it just kind of did that for like 15 minutes. And so I was totally stymied. I couldn't get it to come back. Claude died mid-process. So if it is trying to get training data, it needs to really bolster its infrastructure before leading into that.
I will say the design system creation side of it, where it goes in and scans in a website or looks at you can upload Figma files. Really, they've built a lot of flexibility in it, is quite cool.
That's
and
true.
Feels the baseline valuable MVP of extraction of key brand details. That is at least even at that alone is a very useful implementation. I'm curious because I know that you wanted to get into kind of your early exploration of Glaze.
Yeah.
What are are there any kind of design heuristics in Glaze, or kind of what have you kind of experienced with that tool? And also what is Glaze for folks that don't know?
Great question. Yeah. So Glaze is a new product that Raycast is rolling out. Raycast 2.0 beta is currently being tested. I am testing it. It's not that much different. It's pretty consistent. But Glaze is a new vibe coding app builder. And what's really interesting about it, there's a number of things that are interesting about it. First is that it has its own internal app store. So anything that you build with Glaze can be published instantly into the Glaze store. Now, whether or not this is going to be Raycast Corp's future monetization pathway, I don't know. They charge a subscription for Raycast, but more and more of Raycast's core feature set is being built into macOS through Spotlight, etc. And not to mention all these chatbots now have their own kind of command space, control space, double click, whatever activation. So that is becoming a very competitive space. However, essentially what the team did was they kind of extracted the framework that powers Raycast, because you find that when you build Raycast extensions, that you end up hitting these barriers that are somewhat arbitrary, that are based on the functional set that the Raycast product has decided to expose. And everything that Raycast renders runs through a TypeScript server, meaning that you have the ability to render things in Markdown. You can do mermaid diagrams, you can do SVG, but you can't really do interactive elements. You can't do apps. And so the missing piece for the Raycast ecosystem was essentially to take that underlying TypeScript server and platform, which is now cross-platform, and then to allow people to build fully functional applications on it. So my experience with it, and I may have, I don't know if I try to do something too advanced, you find people that write very simple note takers or timers or things like that. The kind of stuff that anybody would sort of like build and that I see, again, launch on Reddit all the time. In my case, I decided that I wanted to have a desktop app with a menu bar app for accessing my Ring cameras. So I have a couple Ring cameras at my house, and the doorbell rings. I get a notification on my speaker device, which I will not name. And I can't see who's at the front door unless I open my phone and unlock the phone and et cetera. And I was like, this is ridiculous. It turns out that Ring is launching their own app store. And so they've been opening up their API. They've opened up an MCP. And so I started with Opus 4.6 and essentially built through Claude Code a native Swift app for viewing the cameras, et cetera. Maybe eventually I'll publish it. It's not really my intention. But so I took everything that I built, which is fully functional. It shows the event log history for the app. It shows me my cameras. It shows me a motion detection. I was like, all right, Claude, tell me everything that we've just built. I want a PRD. I took that PRD, I dumped it into Glaze, and Glaze built me sort of, I'll say, a functional prototype, but none of the data was live. It didn't authenticate to Amazon. It had faked data inside of it. And I still haven't been able to figure out how to actually connect to an OAuth server, which I have to run. So I run that on fly.io, which then gets the OAuth token and then brings that back to the Glaze app. And I asked the Glaze team about this and like, oh, that's a use case we hadn't thought about. So it's still very much focused on kind of a desktop use case where you have direct access perhaps to an API, or more likely access to local data. But maybe they'll get there, maybe they'll build it out. But it's an interesting, it did a competent job of building the app as a TypeScript app, what was originally kind of a Swift UI PRD. And so there's already hundreds of apps in the Glaze store, even though it's not fully released yet. And it'll be interesting to see if those are any good and whether or not they build a recommendation system inside of it.
Well, I was going to say, are any of those good? Have you tried any? And also hundreds, you're already running into the App Store discovery problem even before it's out.
I know, it's wild. I have tried some of them. Some of them are not bad. They all of them feel a little sloppy, like AI sloppy, in the sense that you can feel the level of nuance and subtlety where each person kind of chooses where everything goes from a UI perspective isn't fully considered, but it's almost, it's not worth it to prompt your way into perfection. And so people just leave it. I did use one app, which is sort of a common thing that I've heard people want, which is the ability to migrate their Mac system from one computer to another. And so what it does is it goes in and allows you to identify all your homebrew settings, all of your system settings, all the things that you maybe get with iCloud syncing, but a lot of developer settings that you lose. So this goes in and actually grabs that, creates a file, and then you can open it on a new computer and then get started from there. So we'll see.
I've got 2 experiments for you to run.
Okay.
I'll give you, actually, I'll give you the most meaningful one, actually. I want to see if, can you build just a one-off prompt? So you don't have to spend any time.
We'll try
you
this.
just see what it does.
Great.
Can you build an interactive wrapper around FFmpeg to do, let's say, a great video conversion, right? That is like an example, baseline, super valuable CLI tool. If you're not familiar with the CLI part of it, it's really annoying. Other people have built front ends on top of it.
How much because I feel you can have an optimistic FFmpeg kind of output where it's convert, but there's a lot of settings. So there's an app called Permute, which actually makes all of those settings available to you. That might be the model that I would use for this Glaze app. But what are you imagining in terms of, is it drag and drop and just you get something else, or what level of conversion do you want?
Let's do a really awesome, just drag and drop conversion, right?
Okay.
You drop a video on.
Yep.
You say, how do you want to convert it? Right? What are your frameworks? Your plus is to be able to save a preset or just preload some presets, right?
Sure.
And then hit go and have it actually use FFmpeg to do that conversion.
Okay.
To me, these kind of wrapper apps, or these ecosystems around the wrappers, are only as good as how far out of the sandbox you can go.
Yeah.
And there's so much value if you can go outside of the sandbox. And I think the success of these Glaze and any of these other systems is just how much you're able to do and how much it's able to abstract the pain of the development process. Speaking of the development process, I wanted to do a quick update on Recursive.
Yeah, where are you at?
So I'm building my own IDE.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm building the IDE is because there's so much baggage in these other IDEs. Really heavy. I opened Cursor the other day and I checked it used 120 gigs on my machine. There was anyway.
It's like running a local model? That's crazy.
It wasn't a local model. It was just they're all cloud models.
Heavy.
So it's just heavy. And so I wanted something really lightweight. The Obsidian model is really interesting, where the data is just open and available. And I just wanted to kind of set up the structure. And my thought the other day was, oh my gosh, I'm a big Copilot user, not the AI, the really awesome finance app.
Right. Copilot.money is
Copilot.money. Yes. Yeah. And Microsoft really
I know.
snatched that. But even Copilot is the highest level of Mint alternative. It just reached a really clean aesthetic. It does, the few things it does really well, but I really want what Recursive does for code, but for finance.
Your own kind of Copilot money for yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
But I realized I actually literally just want what I've built for Recursive, which is the ability to easily pop open a session and have a conversation with any agent, to have an inbox where the agents can message me and I can check in on them, where I can have automations that wake up and check something and then report back or start some kind of discovery, where I can have plugins where I can extend for, in this case, different connectors to actually pull financial data. I already have the foundation for encrypted data. It already basically does what I want. What I want to remove is all of the Git file management and commit flow stuff. I don't need any of the previews. I don't need any of the file trees, but in its place, what I would want is great data visualizations, easy reporting. I would share my Markdown coverage. I already have Mermaid integrate. All of this stuff is basically there. And so the last few days I've been building out the monorepo so that I can, with a script, actually just create
for Recursive.
For Recursive, correct.
Okay.
So that I can, in one click, basically spin up I would say, the shell of an app. And it has all the core functionality and tools and core code from Recursive. And then I can skin it and give it the vertical that it operates in, because I do not want to be coding in the same tool that I'm managing my finances or in the same tool that I'm doing something else.
I think what I'm hearing you say, and that is interesting about the context, as opposed to using one app for everything. The idea is that you want to have different kind of variations or flavors of recursive, and the primitives that recursive comes with, where you're using text files to more or less do the configuration and the setup, could be migrated to different use cases. For example, finances, or for example, writing, or for example, marketing. Who knows? But essentially the recursive foundation, which you're using to build software and applications like the Click browser, now could be ported from this monorepo to basically be used for a different use case.
I think you get a taste of that with Claude Design, for example,
Sure.
right? Where
Yeah.
dedicated, persistent, talk to the model, right area to interact with design.
Yes.
Replace that right area to interact with something with literally anything else, and you scope it just with the tools and tool set to be incredibly effective at maintaining and editing whatever it is that concept
I see.
is.
So this is kind of already happening with Anthropic's suite of products. As they shuffle things around, as Steve Jobs famously said, it's just a matter of emphasis. But you've got essentially Claude Desktop has your chats. And that's just like, I got a random question. My cat is throwing up blue marbles. What is that? I don't have a cat. But if that happens, that's chat. Then there's Cowork. And it's here's where we're going to go have a set of projects that I'm working on. We need some persistence. We need some artifacts and some assets. And that's a space that's dedicated as though you've set your desk up in a certain way and you're going to go do some work there. And then Claude Code in desktop is a place where you're going to be more technical. There's going to be scripts, there's a sandbox and things like that. So essentially you have this set of building blocks and you're just reconfiguring them for different purposes. And so what I'm hearing you say is that you'll do the same thing more or less with recursive. So there's an agent, as they say, agent harness, and then there's a space for the work or for the conversation or for the assets to be generated. Is that kind of the patterns that we're seeing?
Totally. The one difference is it's not all going to be in one app.
Yes, right, exactly.
And so it'll share all the same underlying code. When I make an upgrade in one, it'll come to the rest of them.
I see.
And I learned this lesson with Click is I started Click entirely Mac only.
Yep.
And then I was like, man, I'm going to just try it. I'm going to see how far I can get with iOS and Apple Watch and iPad. And boom, in a week, I'm like, oh my God, the value of sharing all this logic is incredible. And so I reached the point with recursive where I've got over 1,500 sessions in it. Now it's been my core IDE basically for the last month and a half through the pain and now not so much pain. Now I can really explore and make it fantastic. And it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I need to abstract it now. I need to take it basically one level up and do the monorepo. So that's been my little exercise this week alongside getting it all ready to go for downloads and testing, which is super exciting.
Yeah. So anyway, anything to say about the roadmap or about release?
Rushing to release, really trying to get it out as quickly as I can. I think I have a build now that is functional with auto updating. And so the gap is just making sure that all my licensing server and the rest of it is all hooked up to go through and connect and check the boxes. But I'm pumped. I'm so excited to get feedback and to let people go hands-on with it because it has just been an absolute blast to use. And it's let me experiment with new things with Click as well, with how to benchmark it and optimize around speed of how different things load. And so there's a lot to get into. I'm not going to do it right now, but I'm very excited. So soon, I just sent you a build.
Yes.
Your license is not working.
No.
I'm going to fix that bug. And then
patient zero for sure.
Exactly. And then it'll be up.
That's great. And any final quick updates on Click? What's going on there?
I've actually pushed a bunch of updates and they've all been blocked by Apple. So my update is that I've gotten new things out. They just aren't getting to testers because I hit little stumbling blocks along the way.
That's wild that even Apple is censoring, I'll use censor, but like you can use whatever word you like test flight builds, right?
I mean, I get it because I think if there's a risk to thousands of people that you're going to hose their data in some way or do something.
But I thought the whole point of test flight was that, it's buyer beware, right? Like that's what it was meant to be. And now it's become another place for lockdown.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. This is the first time I've hit this many blocks in the review process. It used to be smooth sailing on every build. So it's really interesting. They're finding stuff that was already in the app.
I wonder if they have changed how much AI they're using now. on this. And so things that used to pass by reviewers, like WeatherKit, now actually there's a set of rules that, this needs to be double clicked on to make sure that this is not some privacy thing or something.
I would personally, Apple's one of the 40 companies with Project Glasswing and Mythos access. If they want to pen test my software for me and say, here's all the stuff you should fix and here's the PR to fix it.
Yeah.
Be my guest. I'm happy for Apple to spend a little bit of their tiny budget to cover me. So
we'll ask John Turnus to do that for us. Sounds good.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. That was Worktrees. Little quick update. Hope people like it. We're going to try and keep them short, sweet, to the point, more regularly published. We're going to get this out today.
Yeah. Amazing.
And good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man. All right, cool.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.